Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the class. In this section of this week, we'll be talking about the different types of phrases that we typically run into and how we can kind of identify them as those phrases and what properties those phrases might have. So the main types of phrases we'll be looking at that we've mentioned before are noun phrases, verb phrases, and prepositional phrases. So I'm going to start off with noun phrases. You will have gotten a lot of kind of the conceptual stuff for this part in last week's readings with the word classes unit, but so some of this may seem a little bit redundant, but I'll start off with talking about what noun phrases are. So a noun phrase is a constituent that consists of a noun or a pronoun, which is what's going to be called the head. So we talked about heads before, kind of the most important part of a constituent. And the noun phrase will also include modifiers or its dependents. So those modifiers can be things like adjectives or numerals or demonstratives or things like that. So languages are going to differ in what types of elements can modify a noun. So in English, we have those ones I just mentioned, modify nouns, but other languages might have other types of things that modify nouns. And languages can also differ in the order of elements with respect to nouns. So, for example, we have in English our adjectives before our nouns for the most part, but another language might have their adjectives after their nouns. So this is kind of a list of some of the dependent elements of noun phrases in English. So we have things like demonstratives or that boy, where that is not the head of the noun phrase, but rather something that's modifying boy, which is the head. We have articles like a child, the pie, quantifiers, some accidents, numerals like 5 pumpkins, adjectives, possessors, prepositional phrases, and relative clauses. So in English, like I had mentioned, we do have kind of ordering restrictions. So English noun phrase elements do have a fixed order. For example, we can say those 3 big flowers by the gate, but we can't say big some flowers by the gate, or that some flowers by the gate, or 3 by the gate, those flowers big. Because those in English don't really make sense. Something seems off. And that's what this little asterisk next to the phrases indicates, that it's kind of not really something that's going to make sense to a native speaker of that language. So this kind of argues that the noun phrase has an internal structure and that it's a syntactic unit, because we cannot rearrange the ordering of the elements inside it. So if we could rearrange the ordering of the elements inside it, then it might suggest that it's not actually a syntactic unit. So another way that we can kind of indicate that a noun phrase is actually a syntactic unit is that we can take a pronoun and replace a whole noun phrase, but we can't replace just part of the noun phrase. So if we can take a whole phrase and replace it with a pronoun, that indicates that it is probably a noun phrase and it's probably working as a unit. So I can say, I saw those 3 big flowers by the gate, and I can say, I saw them, but I can't say, I saw those them. So I can't replace 3 big flowers by the gate with them, but I can replace those 3 big flowers by the gate. So that kind of suggests that the noun phrase unit is those 3 big flowers by the gate. I also can't say, I saw them the gate, so those 3 big flowers by is not going to be a noun phrase, but those 3 big flowers by the gate still can be. So again, this kind of argues that the noun phrase is functioning as a whole unit. Noun phrases can also be interchanged. So I can say something like the man slept, a young student slept, 5 people slept, etc. So this is arguing that we can have a lot of different types of the same element. So there's a lot of different noun phrases out there, basically infinite, because we can keep combining different adjectives or demonstratives and different combinations of those. So if a unit can behave in the same way as another unit, it suggests that it's probably the same type of element that we're talking about. So these noun phrases and constituents in general are hierarchical in structure. So constituents can have other constituents embedded within them. So this sentence here, I saw those flowers in your garden, contains an object noun phrase. So those flowers in your garden was the object noun phrase. But this object noun phrase also contains a prepositional phrase. So those flowers in your garden contains in your garden, which is a prepositional phrase. And then this prepositional phrase in your garden contains your garden, which is also a noun phrase. So we have a noun phrase which contains a prepositional phrase which contains another noun phrase. So we can have kind of a hierarchy of all these different units. Now, this is another way you might see this type of structure represented. I'm not particularly a fan of these tree structures, but if you're ever looking through linguistic literature, you'll probably run into something like this. But basically, we kind of indicate that there's a noun phrase up here, and this noun phrase is made up of a demonstrative, a numeral, an adjective, a noun, and a prepositional phrase. This prepositional phrase is made up of a preposition and a noun phrase, and this noun phrase is made up of an article and a noun. So that's kind of one way you might see syntactic structures represented instead of the way that I've been doing it with brackets. So yeah, just so you can kind of see this in case you run into it ever. But I'm not particularly a fan of representing things this way. So this hierarchical structure stuff leads to what's called recursion. So this is basically how we can embed constituents of one type into constituents of the same type. So we can have a big old noun phrase starting with the key, which is the head of it, kind of the most important part. We're talking about the key here. So the key is on the hook, which is by the door in the corner of the room with the fireplace. So in principle, recursion can allow for sentences of infinite length and an infinite number of combinations and an infinite number of embedded constituents. So recursion is something that in theory we can do that is not something you typically see in animal communication, in non-human communication. So this is one of the aspects of human language that seems to be relatively unique. So basically we can get sentences of infinite length and an infinite number of sentences, but it doesn't typically actually happen that way because we only have human memories. We can't really keep track of a recursion that goes too deeply. So that was kind of the noun phrase and an introduction to recursion. But we also have prepositional phrases in English. So a prepositional phrase contains a preposition followed by a noun. So something like to the front or in the back or from Gerald or with a knife. So basically it's a noun phrase, but with a preposition added. Prepositional phrases, we can kind of prove that they're constituents and kind of consistent syntactic units, again through ordering, like we did with noun phrases. So the preposition has to precede the noun phrase in English. We can't say he did it a hammer with, but we could say he did it with a hammer. We also have obligatoriness. So what that means is that both the preposition and the noun phrase are required in a prepositional phrase, and we can't have one without the other. So basically, this is showing that there's a consistent rule that is applied to this unit. So it's probably going to be a unit. So we can say, he likes to cook with Sandy. We can't say he likes to cook Sandy unless we want to mean something completely different, like he's actually cooking a person. So in the book, it says we can't say something like he likes to cook with. However, due to language change and things like that, it does seem like this kind of utterance, he likes to cook with, is becoming more acceptable. So like, for example, if we are going out to a restaurant and we're asking our friends if they want to come, we can say, do you want to come with? And I think to a lot of people that's going to make sense and be acceptable. So this one here is probably a little more acceptable than the book seems to think. But I just kind of included that there so you could think about it a little bit. And then one note also to make about the ordering is that we can have things that look like prepositions that are not before a noun phrase. So we can say things like, where are you going to, for example? And going to, in that case, can sometimes be treated as like a verb plus a particle. So there are kind of exceptions to this ordering rule as well, again, through language change. At one point, we may have had prepositions absolutely needed to precede a noun phrase, but again, through language change, this is becoming a bit more acceptable to have prepositions not immediately before a noun phrase. In this example, I do think this example is probably incorrect and not too understandable, but there are instances where we can have prepositions not preceding a noun phrase. So prepositional phrases, another way we can kind of look at them as a unit or as a consistent category, is that they can be interchanged. So we can say he goes to the store, he goes after work, by bus with Sonia, etc. So we can kind of interchange all these different prepositional phrases, and they all behave in the same way. So that kind of shows that there is this unit that has similar behavior. So there's some kind of consistent thing going on there. Prepositional phrases can sometimes be replaced by a demonstrative. So he keeps the dog in the backyard. He keeps the dog there. He came home after work. He came home then. She fixed the motorcycle with her tools. I don't know what demonstrative could replace that, but maybe there's one out there that could. But anyway, because prepositional phrases can be replaced by a demonstrative as a unit, basically we take out the whole unit and replace it with something else. That indicates again that there's a consistency to the boundaries of that unit, so that there is probably actually a unit there. So the last major type of phrase I'll look at in this section is the verb phrase. So in English, the verb phrase will always contain a verb. It can contain an auxiliary, so something like might in might go. It can contain a direct object, so eat mangoes. It can contain an indirect object, so give to Sean. It can also contain adverbs, so something like in the morning or furiously are adverbs that we can add to a verb phrase. It can also contain prepositional phrases, and it can contain negation. So the verb phrase does have ordering restrictions, just like with the other types of phrases we looked at. So this is one way to suggest that it actually is a unit. So we can say, I reluctantly told the story to my parents after dinner, but it'll sound a bit weird to say, I told reluctantly the story to my parents, or I told to my parents reluctantly the story. I told after dinner the story to my parents. So those are all I'd say understandable, and in some dialects they may be more acceptable, but they do sound a bit, something sounds a bit off about them. So that kind of indicates that there is some kind of restriction to the ordering of verb phrases in English. So verb phrases, again, can be interchanged, so that is something else to suggest that they are actually a consistent type of unit. So my parents ate lightly. My parents were reading a book. My parents liked it. My parents were weird. So there's all these different verb phrases we could say that my parents did. And that kind of indicates that verb phrases have a consistent behavior because they can all fill in this same role in telling us what my parents did. So verb phrases can be replaced by the verb do. So that kind of indicates that, again, they are a unit because they can be replaced by this other thing, and verb phrases can consistently be replaced by it, so that indicates where the boundaries of a verb phrase are. So we can say my parents ate lightly, or we can say my parents did. My parents do lightly sounds a bit weird, which kind of suggests that ate lightly is the whole unit rather than just ate. We can say my parents like the roses, or my parents do, but my parents do the roses is going to be a bit off. So this is, again, suggesting that verb phrases actually act as a unit in English. So here's another little question that's potentially one of the extra credit ones for you, or potentially one of the quiz ones. So look at this and think about, in which of the following examples is a prepositional phrase embedded into a noun phrase? So we have, she put the key on the hook, or she ate cereal in the morning, she remembered the key on the hook, she remembered her key in the morning, she dances the tango on Wednesdays. So in which of these is the prepositional phrase actually part of the noun phrase? So to figure this out, you can use things like try replacing the whole thing with a pronoun, and see if we still get the same basic meaning, or try to go through some of those tests for the different types of phrases that we saw earlier in this unit, and see if any of those indicate that we're talking about a prepositional phrase that is actually part of a noun phrase, as opposed to a prepositional phrase that's just on its own. So again, here's another potential option for kind of an extra credit problem or a quiz problem. Is on the next slide, there's going to be 3 English sentences, and you can divide each one into constituents. So if you can identify where the verb phrase begins for each of these, and then divide the sentence into noun phrases and verb phrases, and then kind of work from there and analyze, does this noun phrase include a prepositional phrase? Or does this verb phrase include another noun phrase, and things like that. So there can be constituents within constituents, but the goal will be for each of these sentences to decide what the different constituents are in terms of where are the verb phrases, where are the noun phrases, and where are the prepositional phrases. Okay, and then we have I think one more possible extra credit or quiz question. So we have 2 possible syntactic analyses of the following sentence. So kind of like that example I gave you at the start with the dog and the cop and binoculars. So we have, she watched the birds in the garden. So this basically has 2 different possible syntactic analyses, and I'd like you to figure out what those are. So basically, where is the possible ambiguity in this sentence? Okay, so that's it for this part of the lectures this week. In the next lecture, we'll be looking at clauses and sentences.